and Jacqueline will be the moderator of this session. And of course, our main speaker is Yoni.
And you will do most of the talking because
You want me all the way?
we brought him all the way. Okay. And I also had a chance to talk to him before yesterday. We're talking about settlements. What is it that you want diaspora Jews to know most of all? What is most critical?
Okay, there's like the current situation. I think what is the most critical thing is, and I'm probably going to talk about it a bit later or much more, that there are a lot of changes that are taking place now in the West Bank, that are happening now in the West Bank. And exactly like if we are talking about kind of a coup that taking place in Israel, so there's kind of a revolution that's happening in the West Bank as well. And I think that if we're talking about the struggle, I think that should be the main focus of the diaspora and the Israelis together, like channel that together. I think that's the main concern. I can elaborate about it, but I think it's kind of something that, because I think it's something that the international community could pressure Israel more than other aspects. Like I'm not sure that the international community again like can pressure on aspects like who will be the next Shin Bet head or something, the head of Shin Bet or something like that. But when it comes to occupation, it's definitely internationally aspect. It has many international aspects, and I think that should be something that we join for. That's how I see it. But maybe also one of my problems is that I'm warning you is that I have a very narrow world that what I know is only the occupation, the West Bank and the occupation. So I'm just not always...
Only?
Yes. So I'm not maybe that, so that's very shrinking my world.
Well, no, I mean, you said that one of the several provocative things, most provocative things that you said there's no Israel without an end to the occupation.
So first of all, I try not to be provocative. I'm trying to, but it never happened. It always, anyway, it wasn't jumping, but I mean, we usually look at the occupation as something, okay, the Israeli, the strong part is doing against the Palestinian. And my belief, and I hope I'm wrong, is that Israel will not last with the occupation. There's kind of circumstances when you think about the people, when you think about the violence, you think about the level of the violence, you're thinking about...
Sorry, can you speak up just a little bit? Just speak up a little bit.
So what I was saying is that I think that Israel will not last with the occupation because the occupation means keeping fighting all the time, killing people all the time, meaning that you have to deal with millions of people that not just discriminated, but also their discrimination is increasing all the time, especially in the last 2 years. Situation that in many aspects, even with the current American administration, I don't think that can last when we see the international community. And again, I don't have enough time, but Israel is different than other countries that in kind of a path to move from democracy to something else. I mean, sometimes we used to compare Israel to Hungary and something like that, but no, Israel is something different, and the occupation is something that I believe can go in Israel. That's how I see it. I'm not saying that everybody sees that way. Many people think that it's kind of mainly a moral aspect, like we should be moral, or what is about the Israeli identity. I think it's more about the Israeli existence. That's how I see it. But again, I really hope I'm wrong, and I'm just the pessimistic guy that you mistakenly brought here today.
No, and please go into detail and say something about well, how the occupation has increased, both in numbers and extremism.
So,
numbers of settlers, I mean.
yes, I mean, I'm going to show the presentation, and
okay.
And I think I'm going to show some images that explain that, but in short, before that, I just want to say that I think that in my mind, I think about two things, which is the title of what I said. Like, we are having kind of an anarchy in the West Bank, anarchy that some of us familiar with before, but the anarchy today is nothing comparing the anarchy we saw before. If some of you, I know that some of you are familiar with what's happening in the West Bank, and at the same time, Israel is building kind of a legal structure to annex the West Bank. And I mean, one example I can give is that, if you can understand, I'm exploring the West Bank quite often, is that when I look at the settlers today, and I see the Palestinians, and I see that whenever there is interaction between Israeli settlers and Palestinians, doesn't matter. I mean, the settlers can almost do whatever he wants to the Palestinians. He can steal from him, he can take. He can beat him, he can wound him. Sometimes he can kill him. Again, go back. I don't want to be provocative, so forget that. So I want to say that because there's a situation that many, like, since Israel is not enforcing the law against settlers, there are many situations that even I've witnessed that I know that the Palestinian is definitely depends on the goodwill of the settler. Okay? I'm not saying it's all the settlers, not at all. We're talking about minority of settlers, but in interaction, that there is an interaction between settler and Palestinian, and the Palestinian is extremely vulnerable and he doesn't have anyone to complain to. This is the situation that we've mentioned, that now you go into the street, someone decided to take your wallet and keep you alive, so you should thank him. But if he take your wallet and decided to beat you up, so you can do nothing. That's the situation that the Palestinians living. I know it sounds, again, maybe provocative, but that's the reality I witness. And that also prepares you to what you're going to hear from me.
Right. Before we do that, I have another question. Some of us, Bob included, went on an Americans for Peace Now tour in 2 years ago, I guess it was, to the West Bank. And one of the things, fascinating people we met was Mr. Shikaki, the pollster. And he was telling us about Palestinian youth. By the way, this was before October 7th, but even then, things were bad. They weren't getting the funds they needed from Israel, which took taxes but didn't pay the teachers, and there were strikes. And so, but nevertheless, he told us that among young people, support for religious Islam, radical Islam, was quite low, higher among their parents' generation. Is that a development that you see?
I think that both societies becoming much more religious radicals.
Really?
Become
Much more religious radicals. I think that there is a strong movement among the Israelis about the Third Temple movement, which become very strong, by the way. It's something that is very concerning. I mean, someone like me, it's very concerning that I see the power that the Third Temple movement has in Israel. And I see also kind of radicalization in the other side. I give you an example, like, after October 7, it's much more difficult to have meetings with Palestinians for me as Israeli. And only now it's a bit changing that the Palestinians are more meeting with us and something like that. I think that this endless war that we are having, and the fact that everybody trying to hold his own identity to lead us to all kinds of corners, it's a bit concerning. Not a bit, very much concerning.
All right.
I'm going to be optimistic in my head of
Good. Okay, well maybe we should get to that for a little bit of optimism.
Okay, should I?
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to stand if it's okay. Okay, it's okay with everybody?
Okay,
If I'm in the way, I'll move. If I'm in the way, I will.
It's about you and whatever it is. So between anarchy and annexation in the West Bank. Okay. So I was invited by Peace Now. Peace Now is actually, most of you know, is like the longest standing Israeli movement advocating for peace through public pressure. Peace Now was involved in many big, very large campaigns for peace. When it was a time, peace between Israel and Egypt, peace with Israel and Jordan, and in the last couple of decades, like peace with the Palestinians, which is one of our main goals. Peace Now having all kind of campaigns, and we're working a lot. We have lots of advocacy also now with the Knesset members. Something which is interesting, by the way, that after October 7, more Knesset members from the center are willing to meet Peace Now and to talk about understanding a political solution, which is very interesting. That the aspect of understanding that we cannot ignore it is actually a bit rising, and now we see more people, more Knesset members talking about that. And I belong to this part, which is the Settlement Watch, and we're actually documenting everything that related to what Israel is doing in the West Bank, especially construction, expansion of settlement, financial support from the government, a bit less about settlers' violence and things like that, but we're also involved in that. We are not monitoring what the military, like all the military operation and that aspect we don't really monitor, although it's very relevant. Might say something about that. And what I'm going to talk about is actually not only about October 7, but like what happened since this government was formed. And when this government was formed, the agreement between the Likud and the religious Zionist party with Smotrich, in the coalition agreement, they said we're going to change the legality of the West Bank. Like everything in the West Bank, like all the responsibility of the West Bank will be in the hands of Bezalel Smotrich, and he will build kind of a new administration, like a new body that will gather everything that related to what is needed in the aspect of construction and land, and it's called actually the Settlement Administration. It's kind of a body. It's very interesting. I'm going to talk about it a bit, which is responsible to all the construction related needs of the settlers and also of the Palestinians. Okay, like everything like new roads, new construction of house units, planning, whatever, this body is responsible. But it means that he serves only the settlers. Okay? The Palestinians, by the way, in the last 2 years, we checked, they got 5 building permits, comparing to dozens of thousands of building permits that the settlers received in the West Bank, in the area that is under Smotrich's responsibility, which is Area C, which is part of the West Bank, not the part that is under the Palestinian authority. And that's one example of the advancing of house unit, and obviously a lot of public infrastructures, when it's roads and things like that, is very much now changed and is under the responsibility directly of Smotrich people, we can call it, but the settlers in general. In the photo you see a group of settlers going to near the naval village, which is Hawara. Some of you are familiar with. What is called the price tag, like threatening the Palestinians and so on. It's quite common. But to be honest, this photo is before October 7. Okay. That's it. And something else which is very, very interesting about the annexation and the process that happened since beginning of 2023, with the establishment of the settlement administration, that all the legality aspect of registration of land, who own, like under which person it would be registered or a body, it's now in the responsibilities of the settlement administration, which make it much easier to settlers to register land under their name. And it's much more difficult to Palestinians sometimes to, now officially nothing changed. That's what I want to say. Officially, you used to go to register your land in a specific department or whatsoever, so now you just move to the different office. But obviously, this registration is much easier and smooth for settlers, and we saw it with and it helped them to expand the settlement in general. And more than that, there's kind of a new legal adversary unit under the Smotrich, or under the settlement administration, that they are responsible to all the legality aspects of the West Bank when it comes to land. Okay? What means that in many ways, Israel decided to withdraw from the international law. I have to explain something. Because Israel used to have kind of a, like, since the occupation is based on the fact that we are in occupied territory, so the international law was always above us when we talked about the occupation. And the civil administration used to consider all the time the international law when he used to promote or to advance or to allow any new construction. Now, a body of lawyers that are dealing only with the Israeli law make it much easier for Israel to develop the West Bank. That's the whole idea of this body. So it's kind of and it's a major change, because if the legal system is changing, so I think everything is changing, or many things are changing. Although I'm not a lawyer and I'm not really fond of court cases. And what is interesting when I'm talking about annexation, so I'm biased, so what I'm always saying, don't believe anything I said, you should, like every academic should do, you have to check resources and things like that. So I had an opportunity to go to an event when Bezalel Smotrich spoke to his public, and he said that, he explained the changes. He explained the changes that happened with the settlement administration. He said, we aim to frame the policy in the way that would be more acceptable first of all, among the international community, and in both in political and legal context, but it means like political, like the international community will not be against it. Avoiding accusation of annexation. Okay, that was the whole idea. Like, we will do annexation, but we will not. It will not be called annexation. So people will not go to the streets against, the international community will not go against it, or talking about sovereignty. So they built a new body, which is also, like in general, the commander, like the military commander, remains the sovereign authority, which is very similar if you're familiar with the Israeli political system. So we have a president, we have a president in Israel. So he's like, I think he's citizen number 1.
He's like the Queen in Canada.
Okay. They're like the Queen in Canada. He's like the Queen in Canada.
For the Governor General.
But he's less celeb, so he's less going to the tablet. But anyway, in general, nobody cares what he wears, or anyway, or who he sleeps with anyway. But in general, but he has no power. Okay, I think the Queen of Canada. Okay, he has no power. So this is exactly, so following the model of the Queen of Canada, Smotrich probably visited Canada before, and he decided to do the same in the West Bank. Okay? So nothing changed. The Queen of Canada is still your queen, probably, but she's not responsible if you will be part of America or not, I guess. Okay? United States. You are part of America always. So that's something which is very interesting. So he understood what he's doing. And something about the settlers I want to say is that they don't have like a background noises, I mean, they're very focused in the purposes. So it's very, very important in what he's doing. And to show an example what happened since about this government, we in Settlement Watch, we are counting the numbers of outposts. Outpost for you is the settlement. Okay, it doesn't matter. I mean, for us it's a bit different, but on January 2023, this government began in December 2022. But for us, it's January 2023. We had 170 outposts. In about two years, we are having like 85 outposts more, which means the settlers are actually building outposts wherever they can, And although, what I want to say, because this is an act which is considered illegal in Israel, but there is no evictions of outposts. Those of you familiar with the occupation, you know that usually what happens is that the settlers building outposts, and some of them being removed by the civil administration, kind of to show that we are enforcing the law. Since January 2023, there were only few outposts that were evicted and re-established again immediately. So in general, we see growth of the presence of the settlers wherever they want. And this is for me a sign of when I'm talking about anarchy. It means that if you want to build an outpost, I know that it's very difficult to believe what I'm saying, but again, you can just say that. It means that you can come with a caravan, or with a car, or with a truck, and it will take a while. If you're Israeli, it will take a while until you be evacuated, if any, okay? If at all. And we see them building more and more, and it's kind of advancing very much, which means that Swartz people or the civil administration very much familiar with this construction of outposts, but avoiding doing anything about it. Like saying, okay, there is an anarchy regards to construction. No, it was before, but nothing to compare. Nothing to compare. Something else which is also interesting is that the settlers actually found a new way to take over land, and it's kind of construction of illegal roads. Which means that if you have a caterpillar or whatever, you have just need a caterpillar, and then you decided to pave a road, you can just pave roads wherever you want, like from one outpost to another. Some of the roads just lead nowhere, but it's actually creates a situation that if you have all kind of roads of few kilometers, the roads are what you see here in red. The blue is actually the settlement, and the rest is obviously the green is actually the Palestinian localities. So one of the things which is very interesting that we noticed since October 7, which was much less before, instead of just paving roads or just cutting roads all kind of ways, hundreds of kilometers away of roads, much more than what you see here. This is what we can be certain of. And it's a way to expand the territory that they are controlling. Because if you remember what I go follow me and say, you remember that I said that if you're a Palestinian, you will try to avoid meet settler, okay? It means wherever the settler is building a road, Palestinians will not work on it, will not use it. Doesn't matter that the road is many times actually on the Palestinian land. So actually it's part of what we see. And I think that the most important thing about what we're talking about, when we're talking about this kind of anarchy, is obviously settler violence, what you probably heard about. And the settler violence is something that began, and I checked that, settler violence began, do you have an idea when settler violence began? Any idea? Pardon?
From the very beginning.
Yes.
Let us say on 1968.
Yeah, exactly, 68. Exactly, 68, the settler violence began. And since then, we have settler violence. The good news, between 67 to 68, we didn't have settler violence. So there's a point of optimism, because I understand that, but anyway, so, and it goes all the time because there's more and more settlers. And it's something that definitely, again, we count like thousands of cases of settler violence, and wait, I don't want this one. And it's something that is very powerful because it's connected to the anarchy, but according to my understanding, it's also connected to the annexation. Because settlers' violence, there's the settler violence that you saw in the picture before. Like settlers going to a village like Hawara, which is a very large village, they're not expecting that the Palestinians will remove from there. They just want to show that they have their own reasons. But there are a lot of settler violence which is very targeting the weakest communities of Palestinians that live like the shepherd communities and very small communities who live in a bit far away from the main Palestinian cities. And it's kind of a thing that began before October 7, as we said, but became very dominant immediately after October 7. From October 8 to the end of the month of October, like I think, if I'm not mistaken, 15 Palestinian communities, between few families to few families, like let's say between 2 to 10 families, each community, has to flee from their locations because of settlers' violence. Today, we're talking about something like a few dozen, I don't remember exactly the numbers, but we're talking about around almost 2,000 Palestinians that were forced to leave the location because of settlers' violence, and nothing happened to the settlers that used this violence. And many times, when a new outpost is being built next to a Palestinian community, the Palestinians already doing the calculation saying, okay, we should move before everything will be burned, destroyed, and so on. And I'm saying that because it's part of the anarchy, but it's definitely part of what the Israeli authorities or whatever understanding that's happening and letting it to happen. That's very clear. Okay? And that's something that is important to show that that what is happening in the West Bank is actually something that Israel wanted to make. And it's very convenient mainly because of the war. Because of the war of October 7. Because the war of October 7 created kind of situation that we all concerned about many other things, but not about what's happening in the West Bank. And something else is actually that Israel began with this government with the kind of the judicial revolution or judicial change, but actually there is definitely a revolution in the West Bank that nobody paid attention to, or hardly anyone except of Settlement Watch of Peace. Now this is why Settlement Watch is so important. No, I really believe that Settlement Watch is very important, not because I'm working there, but it's actually something that you have to monitor. And that definitely creates kind of a change in the West. Now, when we are talking about settlers, and that's something I want to explain, maybe I should do it in the beginning, but I want to say something that is very interesting about the population in the West Bank. Today we have like 500,000 settlers living in the West Bank. Okay. By the way, I always assume that you're all familiar with West Bank, borders, and stuff. Okay, I took it like for granted that everybody is familiar with, but with some understanding. And it's interesting to see that the population is changing in the West Bank. First of all, almost 40%, because now we go a bit, I mean, I have a problem here. Almost 40% of the settlers in the West Bank, they are Orthodox. They're living in few specific locations, like Bitar Elite, Modi'in Elite, most of them very close to the Jewish communities, also to the ultra-Orthodox communities of Bnei Brak, Jerusalem, which you are familiar. And they are kind of an important part, helping to the growth of the numbers of the settlers because they're having very large families. But in general, there are signs when it comes to the changes in the West Bank. Okay? Now, for me, all the settlers are settlers. I don't care if you came because you have ideology or your ideology is that you prefer to live with cheap housing. It's very fair ideology as well. Okay? But it's interesting because this is one group. You have another group that's always shrinking, which is fascinating, and I cannot explain why, which is a secular community or whatever, or sector. Because I cannot explain why, because when you think about all kind of the economic benefits that you're having by living in the West Bank, I really don't understand that why people that not supporting peace or against the occupation, not living in the West Bank. But somehow, and I think that somehow people understand that living in the West Bank is not the place they want to be if they want to be part of Israel. That's how I understand it, okay, for secular people. And also because of what I'm calling the radicalization of the religious society that we have. And the other thing that I want to say, and I know it's important, I want to talk about the religious Zionists. And I want to talk about them, and I know it's a bit problematic because I'm going to point the finger about them. So I want to say there are many good people in the religious Zionists, and like we used to say, some of my best friends are religious Zionists. Having said that, because I know it's going to sound bad. According to my understanding, let's put it this way. According to my understanding, and we're talking about the settlers in general, but I think that if you think about the core ideology, like the people who believe ideologically that Israel should expand the West Bank, not stay in the West Bank. I'm talking about the people who believe that more outposts should be built, more kind of actions to prevent the Palestinians' normal life. According to my understanding, we can talk about something like 200,000 people. I'm not saying ideologically there are much more people, much more who supports the settlement project in general. I'm talking about people who are willing to live in the West Bank, because I want to say what is the difference, I shouldn't say that, but what is the difference between Settlement Watch to Accord? Accord doing surveys what people think. We're trying to say what is happening, what is people doing. Like you can say that you think that one thing, but, or somebody once told me, when I'm talking to settlers, they all want peace. Yes, of course they want peace, but what they're doing for this peace? So saying that you want peace, maybe it's not good to say that to JSpace and Canada and peace now, but that's my way of thinking. And that's something that we have to remember. And then when we're going to focus on who is really involved in the violence, so first of all, we can see that most of the outposts, which are kind of a farm outpost, which is kind of outpost that you're having one family that's responsible to thousands of dunams. I don't know how you measure here, acres?
We are metric system here.
Okay.
Do that.
So 1 dunam, how much is 1 dunam? 1 dunam is actually a 1,000 meter, like in square meters, obviously. So what I want to say that we have a kind of 1,000 farm outpost, which is responsible to something like 5% of the land of the West Bank. All the West Bank is in control of 200 families, something like that. Usually it's something. And most of the violence of the settlers comes from these outposts. Okay? Not necessarily, I'm not saying again that the people who live there doing the outpost by themselves, because I'm being recorded, right? So I cannot say that because I'm but I'm saying that the violent people coming from this outpost, which means they just pass from there, okay? I don't know why, but it happened, okay? And when I'm trying to understand who are the people who are changing the West Bank, and that, so we're talking about, according to my understanding, something like 1,000 people, which is the heat of youth, supported by few more thousand people that goes to this kind of rise of violence against Palestinians, or supporting by action the new outposts. And what I want to say that when you think about it, the revolution in the West Bank is happening just because of few thousands of people, no more than that. And I think it's happening also because the majority cannot really be involved in anything, and also because I think
What about the police?
police.
The police and the military supporting it.
The police and the military. Maybe I should say something about that, but just a second. What is happening is that before the police and the military in general, is that the settlers. I mean, the benefit of the settlers. I won't have something good about the Israelis. Most of the Israelis, including the settlers, they are against settlers' violence. Most of them are against. Most of us. I'm also Israeli. Most of us, we are against violence and we are against illegal actions. Okay? But the problem is obviously the majority of the Israelis dealing with other things, like we talk about democracy, about the judicial revolution, and so on. And I think that one of the things that helped the settlement before the political revolution is that there is no kind of an active resistance against what they're doing. And that's something which means that people, I mean, the active resistance is very small. That's what I was saying. There's not, I mean, it's not true that there's no active resistance. There's active resistance, but it's not very small. For example, just want to give an example. There are a group of Israelis going almost every day, on a daily basis, to the shepherd communities of the Palestinians in order to protect them from settlers' violence, okay? But this number of people, they are between few dozens to few hundreds. If instead of few hundreds, you would have few 100,000 people that are doing that, so obviously it will change, okay? So since, as long as the Israeli public is not engaging to fight the occupation as something that is the current threat and the most dangerous thing that's happening to Israel, so we are in a problem. That's how I see it. Okay? Now, I want to say something about. I should stop or something? Okay. I want to say something about the police and the military, which I didn't put here, and I already thought about before that it was my mistake. Maybe I'll go back to the beginning. I mean, when this government was formed, according to my understanding, when this government was formed, so Netanyahu, which he is responsible, he knows everything, and Netanyahu did something very smart. He said, okay, we have Smotrich to do the revolution in the West Bank. He's a silent guy, he's a nice guy, he knows how to talk to people, he knows how to welcome the hostages that he votes against the deal that will bring them back. And we will put Ben Gvir for the police. Now, maybe he did it because of his cases, the legal cases and so on, but it also had you have the attack dog, I don't know if you say it in English, that will deal with the police, that will be controlled by someone that makes sure that the police will do more or less nothing except arresting Israelis and many Palestinians. And that actually eliminated the police from being involved in settler violence. Okay? Again, I'm being recorded, so I cannot say that, but I could have said that the police is no longer dealing with settler violence. Okay? Or as far as I know. As far as I know. And that's one thing. But I want to say something else which is very important. Also, the army is no longer preventing from the settlers to do this violence. It never did. But what happened after October 7? That most of the recruited soldiers in the West Bank are actually coming from the settlement themselves. So it's very difficult to say that. And I think, and I want to say that, and then I want to finish. And I think that until we will understand that the future of Israel is depending on ending the occupation, and we must be extremely engaged against the occupation. Israel is building this kind of a danger that can come over and change everything in Israel, or according to my understanding, I don't know how it will end. And the optimistic thing is that in the moment, and that's what I want to end, in the moment that Israel as a society and Israel as a government will realize that they want to end the occupation, since I showed you the numbers, I also have these numbers, it shows that it's much easier than it looks. That's what I want to say. Much easier means that it's very easy to decide that no more outposts will be built. It's very easy to decide that no more support, financial support or construction support will be given to the outposts. It's much easier to decide that the Palestinians will have a freedom of movement in the West Bank. Simple. And why I'm saying that? Because according to my understanding, even by doing a small change in the policy, you can do a huge change in the approach of the settlement. I'm not saying that the settlement will not be there, but at least you change or you're trying to fight the settlers' violence and the high temperature that we are having now in the West Bank, or preventing the explosion that might happen in the West Bank. So that's what is very important for you to say, that if we want to make a change, I think it's very easy. Okay? this is more or less what I want to tell you, and of course, thank you.
Yeah, so you still have.
Yes, we've got half an hour.
No, we have 15 minutes, or just a little bit more than 15 minutes, so we can do a bit of a Q&A. Did you want to
Yeah, I'd like to,
For sure.
yeah, a
Yeah.
Q&A.
Yeah.
We're gonna let you ask some questions, but before we do, when you spoke before, you said something about the thing that will end the occupation, and it's about money.
Yeah, I mean, before and yesterday, and I think that I mean, the West Bank, according to my understanding, there is no reason to hold the West Bank, except of ideology or other aspects. Like, what I want to say is that, according to my understanding, there is no gold, no oil, no diamonds, no nothing, no mineral that really makes a reason to keep. More than that, the settler eventually depends very much on the Israeli economy. And without the government support, definitely cannot last. And it means that even if, I mean, we can imagine a situation that there will be a strong international decision that money doesn't go to the West Bank, money that's related to anything. Like, for example, no one can do businesses in the West Bank because of the Bible. But I want to say that the financial system can block the life of many settlers. And an example for this is what happened with the Biden administration and also the Canadian administration that decided to sanction some of the settlers. So the settlers had a huge problem. Suddenly, by the way, a very large companies that bidding the settlement were under sanctions. Okay? So they knew they cannot really bid or pay or nothing, because the sanction means you don't have a bank account, you don't have, I mean, if you are busy, you cannot bid. And what happened to them that Biden decided like 3 or 4 months before the end of his administration, and they knew that it's temporary. But something like that definitely can do. So I think that blocking the financial support is something that can change everything. A lot.
Okay, all right, so we'll take some questions, yes?
Two different ones, but my first one is, aren't you concerned that the silence, the relative silence about the increased violence, going on while our attention's on Gaza, indicates that the Israeli population is not really interested in ending the occupation? Also, kind of related, the 27% of the people that are leaving that are secular, have we ever surveyed them to find out if they are now anti-occupation, or are they just people that go back into the society and then normalize agreeing to it?
Anti-occupation is kind of a big word. I mean, not necessarily, we call it for peace.
It's hard to hear you back.
Anti-occupation, I wouldn't call it anti-occupation, first of all.
And the occupation, if you develop anti-occupation.
You don't have to be anti. First of all, you don't have to be anti in your life. Like my mother always told me, don't be anti, eat whatever I'm giving you. Which means that you're kind of indifferent. And I think that's something which is very dominant in the Israeli public. We don't want, people are not, most of the Israelis never been in the West Bank, okay? They don't know where the West Bank is. According to them, it's a very dangerous place. And I do accept what like, if you remember what the court said about the 60% who understand that a peace means a Palestinian state. So I believe that most of the Israelis believing in a Palestinian state. By the way, even when I'm talking to a hardcore of the right wing, they're saying, if you will promise me that there will be a Palestinian state and no more terror attack at all, which I cannot, I can promise, but I cannot deliver this promise. I don't mind anything. But so I'm willing to accept a Palestinian state. So I think that the majority of the Israelis, in some circumstances, are willing to have a Palestinian state. Being indifferent to what's happening in the West Bank is because we don't care about the good and the bad things happening in the West Bank. Okay, we don't care about it. Like we don't really care what's happening in Uganda. Okay, good and bad thing. We don't. I mean, it doesn't make us that we are really supporting or anti-supporting. Most of the Israelis don't really following what's happening in the West Bank and don't have a strong opinion about it. That's my feeling. Don't have a strong opinion. They might be like pro-peace, but without going to the details. Okay? And they're definitely against settlers. Most of the settlers, including most of the Israelis and definitely the settlers, are against settlers' violence, by the way. Okay? It's not something that you feel comfortable to have settlers' violence or something. They want to make it.
Yes.
What are the strategies discussed for de-radicalization of the settlers? Like, assuming that it will come to an end at some point.
I will say, what are the strategies about de-radicalizing? Are there any strategies to de-radicalize the settlers? I would add, what is in their interest? What they feel is in their interest.
Like the settler feel is very important. That what you mean? Yes.
Well, no, the question was,
Or are there strategies?
are there strategies to
Yes.
de-radicalize?
No, yes. So I think
the
again,
settlers?
it brings me back again to what I understand it was. When you put boundaries to people and they have limit borders, they know what to do or what they cannot do, it's definitely helps to end that. I think what happened, I mean, since the West Bank is the Wild West, as far as I know, it's even much worse. So it's very difficult to challenge the radicalization of the settlers. I want to say something else about, I talked before about the money and I think the power of the money is something that definitely can change everything. Also, I believe although the settlers feel very comfortable to do violence against Palestinians, eventually the army behind them. I mean, there is always the army somewhere who knows exactly who goes, who knows exactly who burned the houses and do nothing. More than that, protecting them, doing nothing. Okay? Withdraw, I mean, the settlers cannot, I mean, if the army will change that and the new outpost will not be sponsored by the Israeli government, so if the law will be implemented in the West Bank, I think it will be the beginning of changing everything. Listen, eventually it's a political decision. If Israel wants, what I want to say, if Israel wants, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong, I believe it's much easier to end this kind of occupation than it looks. Okay? That's how I see it, because the settlers are so much dependent on the Israeli security, on the Israeli financial system, and the Israeli support. So it's much easier than it looks, according to my understanding. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi. So my question is whether the recent decision by the International Court of Justice actually changed anything on the ground in the West Bank or not.
Thank you for this question because it's a very short answer. I'll try to make it longer. Unfortunately, sadly to say, no. The Israeli policy in the last few years is to ignore the international community policy in general, and what is important is definitely what's happening in the States. And again, they waited to Trump to be elected, that actually changed everything when it comes to the international court. I always say that the Israeli foreign policy is Israel-America relationship. That's how. So it didn't really change much, unfortunately. So
I think back there was a question.
Yeah, I was just gonna sort of follow up from what you were saying about the potential for change in the West Bank and how it's easier than you might think, and the role of financial pressure and changes in that. Is there any Israeli leadership on the horizon that would take that seriously and try to curb settler violence by enforcing punishment or actually restrict or curb settlements? Is there any? Do you see any leaders taking up the mantle of that?
I'm trying to think about all kind of figures.
Yair Golan, for example.
Yair Golan is very loud. I mean, he speaks quite loudly against the settlement in general and settlers, and sometimes for good, sometimes it's like too much. Like Yair Golan is good. I mean, Yair Golan could be potential for that. Since it's probably one of the last questions, I'm trying to get to make it more. I think that the optimistic part is that, like I said before in the beginning, we have more and more meetings with the Knesset members that understand that we have to deal with the settlement in general, the settlers' violence. What we are missing now is a party that will say clearly that this is the priority of our policy. So far we don't have it. Okay.
Yes.
I was just wondering, with the escalation of violence, has it come true that settlers have more access to guns? Has that occurred?
Yes, I mean, since again we're going back since October 7th, settlers have much more access to guns. It's guns that provided to them by the army, like yes, but sometimes settlers violence. You don't need guns to be violent, because if you are Palestinian and an Israeli settlers come to attack you, you don't hit back, okay? And you saw the first picture. If you remember the first picture, you see people with axes and tools. So, but it's true that there's much more guns and much more weapons in the West Bank since October.
But there's also in the news that the U.S. have been providing guns. Do you think that has happened?
U.S. providing all the gun and 90% of the Israeli weapon is the U.S. weapon. Maybe I'm wrong in the numbers and it's 80%. I have to check.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
There's some
You,
questions on
yes.
that, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. So, full disclosure that Yonatan and I have worked together before, and I'm coming with more knowledge in the background here. But in 2016, when Trump was first elected, I was working for international organizations in the West Bank, and there was a huge chilling effect on the international community being willing to speak out on anything, because everyone was trying to figure out what it was that Trump was about and how it was going to play out. I think that's probably on steroids right now, but I wanted to ask you how, since I know that Peace Now does a lot of advocacy also with the international community, especially the European Union, how what's happening in the US is impacting the willingness of other actors that could be supporting the Israeli peace movement at this time, in terms of them willing or not willing to cooperate and to take action.
And good question. I'll tell you something, a story. I mean, when I want to be optimistic with the international community, I go to the German embassy in Israel. Because even before Trump was elected, I remember, I'm not sure I'm supposed to call a quote. Anyway, forget. I remember someone saying, we know Trump before he was elected, and we're not going to give up our values. And this is something that I heard also after the election, and our interests. And I think that now the European, when we're talking about the international, because I'm less familiar with the Canadian, definitely not going to follow. I mean, it's true that between 2016 to 20, they used to like the whole policy was following Trump. Now it's much. I have the feeling that it's much less. They understand, they support, they need to develop kind of independent, we can call it, policy. So this is definitely an optimistic sign. I want to say more than that. Even what's so-called the right-wing government in Europe, the Italian, the others, I don't remember now, other countries, they are still very much engaging and involving in ending the occupation. So it's kind of, in the Netherlands, even the Netherlands, you have like someone who is really pro-Israeli, so-called, or anti-Israeli, but he said he's pro-Israeli. If you want to be anti-something, say that you're pro-something. So if you are saying, if somebody tells you he's pro-Israeli, you know that he's anti. So even the Netherlands are kind of, the policy is still different, for example, from the official policy of Trump. Yeah, so let's see how that will do.
Yes. Go ahead.
You know what? I'll save my question for the schmooze. I think it's quite long-winded, so.
Okay.
Very good.
Then, yeah.
When you were talking about hope for change, you were mostly talking about stopping and taking down the outposts. about the option of taking down the settlements? Meaning, do you think that it's not realistic anymore, the two-state solution, with the big settlements coming out and asking that? Because oftentimes when I speak to Palestinians here in the diaspora in Toronto, oftentimes they will say the two-state solution is not going to happen. It's irreversible. Even Israelis say that, and I know it's controversial, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Thanks. I mean, it's a good comment. I mentioned the outpost and things like that. It's mainly like, I tell you, to be honest with you, like when I'm talking to Israelis, you know, people have to accept the change very slowly. And I'm talking about what should be like the immediate actions. Like, let's be realistic. What I would expect from the new generation of leadership is like at least not escalating the situation. Does it mean that the settlement should remain? No, but today, if you're building an outpost next to a Palestinian community, that should be stopped, okay? So, and talking with slogans like, let's evacuate all the settlement, I mean, I can say, if that's what you want, I can say, let's evacuate all the settlement, but let's do it step by step, especially because I see the damage that it do to everything, but, and about the two-state solution, if it will happen or not, you can always say it will never happen. I mean, whatever. But listen, I believe that what the settlers are doing all the time is because the foundation of the settlement is so fragile. Which means, again, without the government, if tomorrow the Israeli soldiers will not be in the West Bank, all the settlers, according to my opinion, all the settlers, even the most violent ones, will leave. Because they're extremely afraid of the Palestinians, more than they should maybe. So it's definitely reversible. In the same time, what is more difficult is actually, sometimes I find it's more difficult to change the public opinion than the change thing on the ground. So this is why we say, okay, first of all, let's free the situation. Second, let's enforce the law. Third, you know, step by step before saying, so do you want to evacuate like half a million people? Okay, to be honest, I'm part of Peace Now, and our name is Now, Peace and Now. And I should begin with what I'm saying to the Israelis. I'm from Peace Now. Forget the word now, let's talk about peace. So that's what I want to say. Thank you for telling that. Next time when I'll be here, I will say, forget about now, talk about peace.
Okay. And I have one comment. I don't know if you remember the remark by Winston Churchill that democracy is really a terrible idea, except for all the others. So you might say that about it, a two-state solution.
Putting his dirty shirt in the laundry, as it were.
There's probably time for one more question.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So a quick question about annexation in general. So if large parts of the West Bank is absorbed or annexed, like de jure, by this government, like Area C or the whole thing, are they not worried that absorbing that will also mean that they're ostensibly be responsible for the people there, and then that would affect the Jewish majority inside Israel?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Very good question. They worry, and this is why I think we have this kind of escalation of settler violence. If you see what's happening with settler violence, is mainly against this kind of the shepherd communities of Palestinians living in Area C, and they're evacuating them to Area A and B. Okay, this is how I understand it. Maybe they're saying something else. So the plan is definitely to have minimum Palestinians, maximum land. That's the whole policy. Unfortunately, the settlers not really concerned about democracy. I mean, they don't mind that there will be annexation and the Palestinians will have some rights, not all the rights. Okay? It's also kind of a fight on a popular. So that's how they're planning that. By the way, annexation is not the ultimate goal, because even after the annexation, I'm always saying, I mean, we are very concerned about annexation, but after the annexation, it doesn't matter what you will do. The 5 million Palestinians remain in the West Bank. Okay? So that's what we have to remember. West Bank and Gaza.
I think we're, okay. Thank you very much. And by the way, during the schmooze time, if you want to ask him about his extremely impressive career as an archaeologist and the founder of Meretz Canada, and most of all, the politicization of archaeology in Israel, which distorts its past. You can ask him about that as well.